Welcome to Marketing People Love. Today we have Delamon Rego. We collaborated together at DECKED behind a campaign that ended up doing tens of millions of scalable views on YouTube. And he's going to talk about some of the decisions that they made to 10x their business over the course of just a couple of years. And I'm not going to lie, right after this episode got done, I texted my business partner. I said, dude, we got to go a little bigger. We got to make a couple more moves that we know can really be a durable part of telling our story and getting our awareness out, even just as an agency. So I'm telling you right now, this episode will inspire you to understand how to get ahead of those plateau moments and bust through to that next level when it comes to channel mix, advertising, the way that you're positioning yourself. You're gonna love it. Delamon, welcome to Marketing People Love.
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be here.
So I just watched a video the other night, Red Bull put it out, of this gentleman who climbed to the top of Mount Everest, and he then decided to ski down it, free ski down Mount Everest. Did you see this video?
I didn't, but I'm intrigued.
Okay. You gotta look it up on YouTube right after this, because not only is it spectacular, but I called my friend. I have a friend named Richard Bailey. He summited Mount Everest, I want to say either this year or last year. And we watched the video in different places at the same time. And he walked me through what the things that I couldn't see, like understanding, like, oh, on that little ridge where he was there, like when I went to summit, 16 people fell over the edge and died. And if he was 1 foot to the left, he goes through the powder to the ground, everything else. And the reason I'm telling you and everyone listening to this story is I realized that there was only 2 people up there. It was him, the guy that was skiing, and the Sherpa. The gentleman who had seen the path, had gone the way. And when we reconnected, we've worked together in the past on a brand called DECKED. Now you're consulting. I just realized so much in our conversation. I almost stopped you mid-sentence and said, holy smokes, I need to get you on the podcast because you are a Sherpa to people who are looking to grow and summit with their brands. And so I'd love to just kick this off with, just getting a little bit of your backstory, real quick, like what led you up to your experience with DECKED, and then just what that growth spurt looked like working with them over the years.
Well, I I love the analogy, and I have a pretty odd experience. I went to college and then grad school, and I was actually a biology major, so very, very different. But biology teaches you the fundamentals of science, and it teaches you the fundamentals of testing and the scientific method. So I think it has tremendous applicability to commerce down the road, even though I didn't realize it at the time. I just did it because I thought it was interesting. And
Yeah.
during the summers, I used to raft guide. I'd guide these 6-day-long wilderness river trips through the wilderness of Idaho. It's actually the largest wilderness in the lower 48 states.
I like how
And we
you went
take
into
these,
like the sales pitch as if you were doing the whitewater rafting. You're like, it's actually.
I am always selling those whitewater rafting trips because they're really the best thing in the world. And the cool part was we take down these really, really high-end clientele. So we take down business owners and executives, and you're a 20-year-old kid and you have full complete capture of these guys for 6 days. So I'd learn a ton from them, and I would ask them a bunch of questions, and I was really curious. So I was always really interested in business and in how they built their business and how they built their channels and what the challenges they had were. And I'd ask them a ton of questions over 6 days and get to know them, and you'd actually become pretty close with these bigwigs of American commerce, and especially the type of business person who wants to go and spend 6 days out in the wilderness.
Right.
This is a pretty cool person, I thought. So did that in the summer in grad school, and then afterwards I joined a company. It was just 2 founders, 0 revenue, and we scaled that and built a 10 million ARR company. It was a software business, and it was a ton of fun. I learned a ton. I built out the sales and marketing side, and had to build out those teams and build out those channels and figure out how to create revenue, and then ultimately figure out marketing, and then figure out customer service, and just build the organelles of a business one by one, which brings me back to my biology days. And then after that, I joined another tech company as a chief operating officer. That was actually an agency enabled with tech. So I got to see the agency side, which is pretty interesting. And then after that, this guy called Jake Peters, who I'd taken down the river many, many years ago, he started trying to recruit me to DECKED. And he, chatted with me when I was young and was impressed because I was one of the few people who asked a ton of questions of business people. So he kind
Yeah.
of had me in the back of his mind. And then he was looking for a growth leader at DECKED. And he'd started that company a few years before. It was growing. And it was at the point where it was starting to get pretty interesting. But I kept saying no. I kept saying no. And he kept bludgeoning back towards me because Jake Peters is a force of nature. And eventually I thought, this is great. I had a young kid. Moving back to Sun Valley, Idaho sounded fantastic. So decided to joined DECKED. And then over the next 6 years, we built that from, double digits business and more than 10X'd it in 6 years.
Yep.
So really, really fun time, a lot of growth, a lot of challenges. The company changed significantly every 6 to 12 months. My role changed significantly every 6 to 12 months. And, had a great time, worked with a lot of great people and built a company that is definitely going to stand the test of time, is a pretty well-known brand and certainly in the truck world and truck industry, both across blue collar and recreational activities, or both across blue collar and recreational applications.
Yeah.
And learned a lot.
Yeah. So, okay. That's a perfect jumping off point because I think there's a lot of people out there that may not understand what 10x actually looks and feels like. So, for hypotheticals, that means 10 million goes to 100 million. 20 million goes to 200 million. 30 million goes to 300 million, right? People don't, I think, understand what that actually looks and feels like when you have it in practice over a 5 or 6 year, period of time. It's growth that so many people are trying to figure out. And it's part of the reason that, I wanted to have you on because I think a lot of people get stuck. I know you guys were heavily direct to consumer. A lot of people get stuck anywhere between, we'll call it 10 million and probably about 40, 50 million in revenue is a zone where where we see a lot of brands get stuck. And there's a variety of reasons. And so I know you consult and I know you work with other brands as well, but I'd love to hear a little bit from your perspective on what do you feel like the brand did well to either get ahead of some of those potential plateau moments, or what were some pain points you experienced that then had you scrambling to fix them to break through those plateau moments?
Yeah. So great questions. First of all, 10X plus growth. It feels like barely controlled chaos constantly for years. Everything is changing so quickly. The org is changing, the org is growing, your channels are changing, how you interface with your customers is changing, your processes are changing, tech, systems, content, data, everything in the company is just changing again and again and again and again and again. And it's really exciting. It's also really hard. It's scary. You're always doing something that you don't know how to do definitionally. I think there are a few interesting things that at least helped us grow to that scale and to continue growth through that $10 to $40 million range where so many companies see CAC increasing, growth flat lines, the meta machine isn't as efficient as it used to be, and then you really run out of incremental dollars to invest in new initiatives. So on our end, there were a few things that went into that. One was the mindset. I had the mindset always, and Jake Peters, the founder, and the other execs had the mindset that we were going to go build $1 billion company. So that was our goal. Full stop. Build $1 billion revenue company. And when you have that deep in your bones, you just think about everything differently. You think about how you want to approach channel differently, how you want to approach product differently, how you want to approach your customer funnel and customer education differently. So having that mindset and that ambition changed how I want to think about things because we were never trying to go from 40 million to 50 million. We were never trying to go from 50 million to 60 million. We were trying to go from 50 million to billion. And those are the pieces that we wanted to put into place. I think every year was just an epic battle against mediocrity because to build that $1 billion growth, you have to wage that war against mediocrity and you have to definitionally do things other companies either can't do or won't do and do things that other people either can't do or won't do.
Okay.
So you really have to do
So give me
the hard things.
I'm so jacked right now. Like, okay, so what did that look like? Like we'll say, anywhere between that 20 and $40 million run rate. Like, what does that look and feel like to do something fundamentally different or to take those risks or to because I'm like, that all sounds great in theory, but like I'm sure there were things that felt very scary at the time. Give me some examples though. Not scary, but like, okay, like, give me some examples. Like I'm so curious what that looked and felt like practically.
Awesome. So yeah, practically it looked like 90% mistakes and 10% big wins on the key things that let us screw everything else up and still come out
Uh,
ahead. And I think that's what's really interesting about growth is we made a ton of mistakes. We, launched stud products. We hired people who didn't work out. We had bad pricing. We chased KPIs that were dumb. We, missed revenue forecasts and crushed revenue forecasts. And we invested in different channels too late or too early or too heavily or too little. And we, screwed up inventory positions. We screwed up cash. We delayed on big website upgrades. We created content that didn't work. We created content that worked great. So I think we screwed up so much on the tactical side all the time. And the learning from that is it really helps me understand what were the few things that we did really, really well, which meant that we could screw up so frequently on the tactics along the way and still come out ahead and create an iconic brand and create a business that could survive that growth curve and drive past 40 million and beyond. The most important one is choosing the right market. So this was Jake Peters' big thing. He was the founder of DECKED. He believed heavily in, pick a large, forgiving market, build a product that people love. And if you do that, you can screw up a lot and you can still thrive. So we picked a great market. The aftermarket automotive space was a good market. It's durable. It's big. There's a lot of industrial companies that aren't doing a lot of marketing in there. And so we're able to go in there and tell a brand and build a brand, tell a story, create good products and scale there. Not necessarily the most replicable thing if you're in the wrong market today, but it really is important. So, we had a lot of success and some of that was luck by being in the right market. The second big one, which people say all the time and is absolutely true, is the org chart is everything. People are everything. So if you want to build a best in the world brand and if you want to be able to scale and if you want to grow past 50 million, you just have to either find or train people who can do that. And there's no other way to get there. So I think that most people, if you ask most executives, they probably spend 5% of their time on recruiting or training, maybe 10. I think you should spend 25% of your time on recruiting or training. I was constantly recruiting all the time, always, everybody that I talked to. I remember I met people on airplanes who were professors of mechanical engineering. I met a guy who was a mechanical engineering professor and I took down his information and I sent it to our VP of engineering and I said, hey, talk to this guy. He knows DECKED. He saw my hat. He likes it and find out who his best young engineers are. Let's go hire those people. I would talk with anybody and if they were good, I'd put them onto a little short list of people I'm going to hire one day. I had an approach where I would identify the 10 best companies for a certain position in the world. So let's say it's brand building, Yeti's clearly going to be on that list. Patagonia's going to be on that list. And then let's take a short list of the people who are responsible for driving that kind of epic stage, that scale stage for that function, whether it's brand building or e-com, performance marketing, sales, whatever it might be. And let's identify the 10 people in the world who are the most qualified to go and do that. And then let's go find those people, talk to those people. And it might be them. We hired a few of those, or they might know the right
right.
person, but you just have to find the right person. And it's really hard to do. It takes a lot of effort. And then when you do find those people, you have to convince them to join. So we put a lot of effort into our recruiting process, into our hiring decks. I love to do actually screener interviews just to get really good people excited about joining. And over time, we built a really good team. The other half of that obviously is training the folks that you have. We did a lot of work there too. Kind of goes back to the mindset side of things, but our mindset was we wanted them to be the best in the world. We never achieved that, but we constantly talked about that and focused on that. And one thing we did was we actually connected every single person in the go-to-market organization with, here are the 3 to 5 people who are the best at that job function. Go meet them, go talk to them, go learn from them, and then figure out a way to innovate on top of what they already know to go and make your function at DECKED even a step better. So we had people going and meeting with, again, brand people, performance marketing people from Yeti, sales, partnership people from Pella, right? Just very, very different organizations, but each person identified the best few folks, go and learn from them. And then we actually ended up hiring a couple of those best in the world experts as well, which is kind of
Man,
exciting.
you
So
were
that
you
was a
were
big one.
networking like crazy.
We're networking like crazy. Yeah. And it's really hard. You still get a lot of those hires wrong, right? But if you're constantly training people and if you're constantly setting it in their heads that we are trying to be the best in the world at our functions, and then you try to bring in folks like that, you do start to build a good team over time. And of course, it's a little bit different at each stage. The people that we're attracting at 10 million, 15 million, were very different from the people we're attracting as we started to scale. But the effort is what
Yeah.
matters. And really, I think any good executive or go-to-market leader should be spending 25% of their time on this because it makes everything else
I
easier.
will say, what I'm loving about this conversation is when I'm talking to you and you say something that like it hits me right in the chest, challenging even the way I've been thinking. Something you said earlier around the idea that like you might mess up 9 out of 10 swings that you take, but when you do get those major connection points, like they can continue. It's like as long as you're taking big enough swings and taking like putting yourself out there. Obviously, there's things that you wouldn't want to do because they would truly tank your business. But I would say there's so many times that we don't. It's like, oh, like I could invest. It depends obviously on the size and the scale, but it's like, ooh, like what if I did this and it didn't work out, but what if it did? But what if it didn't? And then you end up a lot of times I see that with mix of getting into new channels, new creative. Like there's a lot of that where it's like, but what if we try to get this channel working and it doesn't work and we waste our money? Like there's so much of that thinking, and yet the benefit of when it connects, silly analogy, but I had this moment the other day where, the guy, this year, the big dumper. I actually don't know his actual name. I'm embarrassed to say I'm a baseball fan, but I'm blanking on his name. But he was the Seattle Mariners catcher, goes by the big dumper, and I'm totally forgetting his name. I'm gonna get roasted for that eventually. But I was so curious because he hit something like 64 home runs this year, and I'm thinking to myself, he's up for an MVP candidacy. I don't know if he won. I don't know if someone else won. I haven't followed it closely enough, but I looked it up and I'm like, he hit like 251. I'm like, he hit very average in terms of average batting average. It's just that exorbitant number of those hits were home runs. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like
I love it. I love it.
he didn't get any more contact than anybody else out there in the world. It's just more of them were home runs. And,
Hmm.
and because of that, he stood out. And so
I love
it,
it.
it was interesting when you were saying that, because I know when we worked together, it was specifically around creative for YouTube. I know you guys were running YouTube at the time, but I don't remember it being like a major channel. You guys took a pretty big bet on the channel to create the creative, to go after it and everything else. And I have to imagine that the series of moments with Decked is so many things where, again, you're making a bet on yourself and you're hoping that you can parlay that into momentum. I'd love to really understand, like, what did that look like channel wise? Because I think that that's the biggest thing I see is that people want to continue investing in the things that they know, quote unquote, they know work, but then those things eventually have diminishing marginal return. And it also it puts you in a really fragile space. I always think about like a single propeller plane versus like if you had a helicopter that had two things, and hypothetically if you could run on just one of them spinning, two propellers, three propellers, like the more channels you have, the more places you're reaching new customers, the more balanced your approach is, the more forgiving some of your media buying days are, and everything else. What did that look like for you guys as you moved into
Yeah.
new channels? Yeah.
Awesome question. So really, if you think about driving growth and scaling, again, past that 10 to $50 million stage and beyond, there's really only five levers that you can pull to drive growth. You've got channel, you've got geography, you've got price of your product, you've got marketing initiatives, and then you've got product. So those are the levers that you can pull. Now, with any of these, what usually happens is they follow that classic S curve where you start out, let's say you're starting out with a new channel or a new geo or a new marketing initiative. You might start out with meta ads. And at the beginning, you're trying to figure it out. Your ROAS isn't great. You're not spending a ton of money there. You're not driving a lot of leads. But eventually, you figure out the playbook. You're able to scale up meta quite quickly. And you're able to drive a lot of spend. ROAS is actually pretty good. And you ratchet up the middle part of that S curve. And then eventually you start to reach saturation, your CPCs start to get higher. Maybe you're saturating your audience, clicks are getting more expensive. Sometimes they're even getting rarer as others start to advertise and you start to go on the flat part of that S curve again. So the key to being able to continue growing consistently for years and past, many, many different levels of revenue is to successfully layer those S curves on top of each other, where as one channel is maturing, you're starting to layer on the beginning parts of the next channel. And then as that channel starts to take off, it starts to be able to continue to drive expansion on the revenue side, even though some of the other historical channels are reaching maturity. So that's the way that we tried to think about it. We did not always get that right, but we got enough of that right to be able to drive continued growth through, 10 to 15x growth during the time I was there. On the channel front, we started out with, more of a DTC and retail focus. Actually, we started out really as a
I didn't
retail
realize
focus.
that. Wow.
We started out where, we're selling in aftermarket automotive as a channel. And these are, 3,000 mom and pop aftermarket automotive shops. And then in 2019, we started to get really serious about DTC and we started to build that channel. So that started to help inflect our curve. DTC was going faster than retail and we were able to layer on this additional
And
revenue.
I just want to call a quick timeout to point out that it's like, what is the median price point for a decked product and installation? $1,500, right?
$1,500 about. So we had high
Exactly. So
ASP.
I'm like just, and probably a little bit of more education than like a typical product. Will it fit my cab? Truck bed? Will it? Does it work with my brand of vehicle? Like all of those question marks that like you don't have a physical salesperson selling it now. It's like it unleashes a whole new challenge, right? Being direct to consumer, high price point, not one time purchase,
100%.
non-consumable good. It's not like it's something that, I imagine you guys somehow started looking at LTVs and stuff, and maybe people started upgrading their trucks and buying new ones, which a whole nother, but like, I just want to call a quick time out there because I'm like, whoa, like to think you went from mom and pop retailers to direct to consumer selling a $1,500 system.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, totally. And you're exactly right. There's a long lead time. It's an expensive product. It's tied oftentimes to another purchase, which is a new or used truck. So some people would start researching years in advance, buy their trucks later. And so you had to deal with this long purchase cycle. And obviously you have a high ASP at the other end, but advertising looked like prospecting to huge audiences and then working them slowly down that funnel, which could sometimes take years. So so we layered on the DTC channel. After that, a couple years later, we started really working on the B2B channel, which was fleet business. So selling, 1,000 units to the AT&Ts of the world. And same thing as our DTC started to grow slower, we layered on this fleet business, which spiked and became a huge grower. And we actually built a pretty big fleet business. And then in my latter time at Decked, we were looking at expanding into the specialty retail side. So your Ace Hardwares and your, local outdoor shops and Shields and all these different types of companies. So we definitely approached it that way on the channel side. And then within DTC and really our overall marketing mix, very similar. We started out spending a lot on Meta and Google, and then we started to run tests because Meta and Google are very trackable, right? So we started running tests on what happens on the YouTube side. And I remember we did this very simple test, which, everybody at YouTube tells you not to run. I don't know why, actually, probably because they want more money. And we just ran YouTube in 6 states, and we didn't run
A
YouTube
holdout test.
in 6 other states. Yeah, but it's just like the simplest holdout test ever. You didn't need any advanced software for it. We just did it, and then we flipped those states. So I think we ran it for 8 weeks, and then we flipped the states, and we ran it for another 8 weeks, and we saw very clearly that YouTube had a 6x ROI, 6x.
It's insane.
Which is impressive. So huge return. It's really a return on ad spend, not ROI if you account for gross profit. But yeah, we got $6 in revenue for every dollar we spent on YouTube. So we ran that in summer 2020. And then of course we said, okay, great, we need to expand YouTube. It's not as trackable, but it sure does have impact. So then we worked with Raindrop. We got some new content. We wanted to get hero content that would last for a while. And then we put that into YouTube and we spent a ton of money behind it. Over time, a brand that's scaling through that point in the inflection curve, 20, 40, 50 to 100 million in revenue, should be spending a higher percentage of their revenue over time on channels that are going to not necessarily drive last click activation, but are going to set the stage, create new aware customers that are interested and intrigued, and are going to feed ultimately your performance advertising
Yep.
for years. So we found that it was very beneficial to take money from performance advertising and spend it on these higher level brand initiatives. Again, you're looking at those S curves, right? So as you're first trying to figure it out, yeah, you're not going to be great at YouTube. You're not going to have the best content. You're going to need to learn. It's going to be expensive. It's going to make performance advertising worse, but the performance advertising S curve is going to saturate. You're going to flatline. And if you haven't put that time in on the brand building side, you're
Right.
going to be too late. And you're not going to have built the content. You're not going to have generated the learnings and built the structure and hired the people, frankly, who are going to be capable of telling that story to the next set of people that you need to tell it to expand the brand. And the danger of doing that is if you're too late on some of these things, then your growth slows and it
I
becomes
mean,
much
yeah,
harder to
you
hire
nailed it.
people. So it
You
becomes
nailed
much
it.
harder
It's
to,
so interesting.
you don't get
You
people
know,
excited.
I'll give you another I'm gonna give you an odd example, but it's so true. This is getting personal, on our end, but, like, during our time at, with Raindrop, like, we were we had moments where we were growing very fast, taking on bigger and bigger productions and, even $1,000,000 plus type of productions where, you know, working with big companies, different payment terms. And one of the things I learned along the way is like we had a bank that was constantly asking, "Do you want to extend your line of credit? Do you want more credit? Do you want more?" And we were always like, "No, we're good." Like, why would I need that much money? And then it always came with strings attached. Like, well, if you do get a bigger line of credit, then we need like a quarterly reporting of this and that. And it just sounded like a big headache. And then, about a year and a half ago, all of a sudden it was like, oh, we have a ton of deliverables. We don't have the cash. We go back to the bank and we're like, here's how much money we're owed. Like we need to extend our line of credit. Like not even to the amount that they offered us previously. They're like, we can't give you money anymore. Like, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like you can't give
Classic.
us like we need it. Like we have like the money's coming in. Like and we just need you to help. And we ended up getting a loan from someone else, right? That it all worked out. But it's seared in my mind that like when we didn't need the money, they were willing to give us triple the amount. But then when we needed the money, they weren't willing to give us anything. And the way you're describing, like waiting for a channel to basically saturate and decline is exactly that's the panic I feel in these brands, even though they're very like a lot of them are very large and they get a hold of us. And it's like if they get a hold of us on the downside of that, they're like, well, here's the thing, like we actually don't have any money to even try other channels and we're hemorrhaging over here. And it's like
Exactly.
I'm now the
Yes.
the version of the bank being called, "Can you give us a loan?" And I'm like, "I can't. This is just a bad situation." You kinda waited until it was a problem, and like I said, we learned that the hard way, along the way, and it's this funky thing. You said, like, you have to take advantage of when you have the momentum to not be what's the word I'm looking for? Like, complacent and the only way to do that is what you were talking about earlier. Is like if you're thinking about 1,000,000,000 and whatever the number is, if you realize that like you're not just trying to get another 5 or 10% of EBITDA out of the business, like if you have bigger goals in mind, that margin of error then becomes the way of being the big dumper and hitting more home runs and getting on more channels and continuing to grow. I'd love to know, and it's kind of putting you on the spot, like, I didn't pre-ask you this question, but does any specific thing come to mind where you're like, "This was one of the biggest, like, swings and misses slash mistakes we made," and then, like, looking back on it, this is one thing that we did that I'm like, I would do it 1,000 times over, and it's changed the way that I think about, advice to brands?
Yeah. No, this is great. So swings and misses, I think that more of those were more around
Mm,
the timing of things. So we made a big swing towards fleet, right? I mentioned that. And we got excited because we had this big fleet orders, few hundred units, which, high ASP, it's a pretty solid order. And we thought, oh gosh, if we can just go and get all the nation's fleets buying decked, that'd be fantastic. So we started to put resources towards that too early, actually. And we diverted from our other channels. And our other channels were still on the steep part of the S curve, and we were doing great. And we banged away at the split channel with too little investment, not the right product, not the right channel strategy, not the right people, and we failed for years. And eventually, we were able to have enough resources to go in there and make a really big channel. But that came at a better time, and it came. And this gets back to how do you layer these on to nail the timing, because that's the key. Is you can't be too early, you can't be too late. eventually got to the point where we were getting good contribution margin out of our other channels. We used that contribution margin to go and build a fleet channel. And then later on, fleet started to be a really nice accretive contribution margin channel. So then we started to use that money to go into specialty retail and go into the Ace Hardwares, et cetera, et cetera. So it really was more, eventually we did start to nail these channels. It really was more of a timing question. Another thing that we did too early was go international. So we were pursuing too many channels at once. If I were to do it again, I'd be more methodical and really follow those S curves. And I said, okay, great. We're seeing success at automotive retail. We're going to layer on D2C. Okay, great. We are seeing success at D2C. We're going to layer on B2B. Okay, great. We're seeing success there. We're going to layer on one international market. So we did too much of that at first. We did okay because we were able to respond well, and eventually we were able to get ahead of this and really figure out the contribution margin of these different channels. But we were a little bit too scattered at first. So we definitely had swings. Not all of them worked out right away. And in terms of things that I wouldn't have expected
not
to
so
work
much wouldn't
out,
have expected it to, but just
that
things that
really,
really connected where you're like, ooh, I look back and I'm like, I'm so glad we invested in, specifically because this is a more marketing focused podcast. I'm curious if there's
yeah.
different things initiative wise that you're like, ooh, I'm glad we did this because it really set us up for growth, especially top of funnel, because I think everyone's always
Yes.
wondering
So
like, okay, yeah, I can run PPC and I can get my bottom of funnel traffic and capture what's there, but like what allowed you, what are those, what's one or two of those moments where you're like, yeah, this was looking back on it, I'm so glad we did it, and it's advice I would give to other people.
yeah, awesome. So I think that what's really important to invest in early and often is anything that is the combination of durable, effective, and
Durable,
scalable. So it's obviously got
effective,
to be effective,
scalable.
or why do
Okay.
it? And if it's not durable, then you're investing in something fleeting, which can be good. It can have a good return, but it's not going to compound for you. And then if it's not massively scalable, great, awesome. Maybe you can use it to drive profitable growth for a small company, but it's not going to drive the engine that powers billion-dollar growth. So durable, effective, and scalable. One of the best things to do, which gets back to you, and this isn't just me being self-serving to you, Jack,
I
but
love where this is headed, Delamon.
it's
I love it.
it's content. Yeah, it really is. So if you create the right piece of hero content or the right website, right? We spend a lot of money on websites, and they're really good investments because it's durable, it's effective, and it's scalable. So people are often so scared to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a website or hero content, but these same people are spending millions of dollars on performance advertising annually. As you grow, you're spending more than 10 million. You're spending tens of millions on
Yep.
performance advertising annually. So to carve out a very small percentage of that to make sure that you've got the right durable, scalable, and effective assets underpinning that spend, either on the content side or on the website side, is hugely impactful. I'm very, very grateful for every single investment that we made on website and content. And then same thing on the retail side, fixtures. So you spend money on fixtures that stay in stores for years. They drive awareness in a very, very scalable way. And millions and millions and millions of people are going to see a few thousand fixtures that you put on into retail over time, and they're going to stay there for 10 plus years, and you'll have to reinvest every year. So overall, those are the investments that I would make earlier and often. Carve out more of your performance marketing spend, grow a little slower that year or that quarter is usually going to be the result because you're spending a little bit less on performance advertising, but you're going to buy an insurance policy on your growth because a bigger portion of your spend is ultimately going to be going towards more eyeballs or a conversion engine, on the website side that is going to last a very long time.
I mean, I'm over here. I feel like I want to just put a hand in the air and say amen from the pews. But because one of the things I've constantly thought about is that there's a reason that we call creative assets assets. The reason I say that is like we just got done with a project actually with Graza to redo some television commercials where we were handed footage from previous shoots and then asked like, can you spin up something totally new that would be on brand and look great? And from my perspective, the new spots look way better and sound better than any of the original ones. And that's not even a knock on the original ones. But what I walked away realizing, because they're not the first brand to do that with us this year, where we we're able to leverage previously done photography, video work, whatever, to create something net new, you start realizing like how often people don't take advantage of the fact that like content and storytelling is an asset that you can re-leverage and reuse. It is not even UGC, assets can be re-leveraged and reused to create net new storylines. And so often we think about content as almost like coal, like something that we just burn and it's gone. And I love the way you said that it was durable. Was durable the first one, effective,
Durable, effective,
scalable.
and
I loved
scalable.
that. And I think even if it's like, hey, we're gonna do some sort of partnership or maybe a PR stunt, it's like seeing it through the lens of like, okay, well, the moment in time is the moment in time, but how can we capture it to continue to leverage it and continue to take advantage of it? I think what I really hadn't thought about in a long time until you said it out loud was that there's a reason we call them assets. It is an investment in the story. I mean,
I
it's
love it.
so
Yeah,
true. And I think what I love about hero content in particular is that a lot of people have just never really told their story from start to finish. I think that's if you force yourself to do that, it helps you to tell your story in other places as well. Like, I think a lot of people just have never really, as a company or brand, told their own story from start to finish. Maybe they've had people, UGC people talk about why they love this is why I love Decked and this is great. And let me show you some of the features. But like to actually create something coming from your brand that you can use and leverage and repurpose. I remember too, like the project we did together, we would cut to scenes where the product was being like pressure tested and used in the field and all these things. And it's like you can just leverage and re-leverage so much of that content. I love that.
totally. And that's why I think people get it. I think people get it backwards. So where you see a lot, let's say somebody's at 500K a month in spend, and where you hear a lot is people saying and asking the question of how do I make this 500K a month in spend more efficient and more effective? And that's very common. I think they're asking the wrong question. The question that I always wanted to ask was, if we're going to be spending $2 million a month in spend, what needs to be true and what assets do we need to have? And I think that's a much better question because the answer to it becomes very different. If you're asking, how do I make this 500K a month and spend more efficient? You're thinking about campaigns. You're thinking about campaign structure. You're thinking about ad copy and ideas and all these things that are very tactical. If you think about what needs to be true to drive $2 million a month in spend, then you're thinking about what are the capabilities and assets that we need to create or build. So you're thinking about what does the org chart need to look like? Who needs to up level and what do those people need to be? What content do you need to create? How much you need to spend on content? What do you need to do from the standpoint of your core brand elements? Is your logo good enough? Are your color schemes good enough? Do you look professional? Do you have a website that makes you look like a $2 million a month brand? And you identify all these gaps, and then you can just go about systematically filling those gaps. And the way you grow from $20 million business to $25 million business is make 500K and spend more efficient and get to 600K. The way you grow from a $20 million to $200 million business is you identify the gaps that you have to be able to spend like a $20 million business effectively, and you
Yeah.
relentlessly go
So
and fill those
I want to
gaps.
make sure I ask you this because I mean, look, I feel like if you're this far into this episode and you're listening to everything you're saying, I love it. I started this with this Sherpa mindset because I mean, the number of things that you have seen, can only be done with the wisdom of learning both what works and what doesn't work. Where does your consulting work now take you? And like, what type of brands are you looking to connect with? I just would love for anyone that's listening that's like, ooh, I could use more of this guy in my life. Would love to just give you an opportunity to just tell us a little bit more about what you're up to now and yeah, how you're leveraging this expertise.
Cool. So it actually it comes from early when I was talking about our approach to try and be the best in the world. And I mentioned this project where everybody had to go and find the best people in the world and learn from them. So that's something that I've always tried to do and always did at Decked. And I was very fortunate to be able to work with truly some of the best people in the world at the different functional areas that I was responsible for, which were, retail sales, e-commerce, brand, and B2B sales. And so I worked really closely with a great guy called Jonathan Markart, who is a former VP sales at Yeti, worked with a former, CMO of Pandora, and was really lucky to work with fantastic people. And then we had Charles Kahn, who is chairman of Patagonia, on our board of directors, and he would give some very harsh brain feedback that was also very helpful. So I benefited from that. I benefited from that hugely. as I came through DECKED, because you just make so many mistakes and the future's opaque, and trying to figure out how you can build and scale this company. So that's what I'm working on now, specifically working with founders and growth executives at companies that are between $10 and $100 million in revenue, and who want to be able to put together that growth engine and growth operating system channel strategy that gets them to 200 million revenue plus, with good growth, good economics, positive EBITDA, and they don't have to raise and burn a bunch of money and give a bunch of equity to fund that growth. So those are the folks that I'm working with now. And it's a little bit different depending upon the company, but we're spending a lot of time on lowering CAC. So if you can significantly lower CAC at your current state, then you can unlock those dollars that you can then invest into the new channel. So really, it's two things. One is, where can we find those dollars? And you find them either in customer acquisition cost today, or you find them in cash conversion cycle, which we do a lot of work on too. Is simple things, blocking and tackling on terms negotiations and inventory can unlock the cash that then you can invest into retail displays and a retail team if you want to expand into retail, or international if you want to expand internationally, or new product development if you want to expand on the product side. So yeah, working with a small number of folks and figuring out, what is the strategy for those different S curves? How are we going to stack them one on top of the other? Get really tight on that, and then figure out how we're going to get the cash from either CAC, or cash conversion cycle to go and fund those initiatives. And it's been a lot of fun working with a few different folks, and seeing a lot of success on that, and decreasing CAC, spiking, accelerating revenue growth, and getting a lot more certainty around how we're going to do that long-term channel strategy, marketing strategy, geographic strategy.
I love it.
To
And
hit
then
the $200 million
final
plan.
question would be, where can people find you? I mean, I don't know that I found you all over the social medias. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So I hate social media. I've always hated social media, and I hate influencing and doing all that great stuff. I like operating and
Are you
like
going to give out your
fixing
Gmail
shit,
address right
fixing
now?
problems,
How do
and getting
people
real
reach
with
you?
operators. Yeah. So delamonr@gmail.com. Hit me up. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Delamon Rego, DELAMONREGO. Hit me up on LinkedIn, or hit me up on
Oh my gosh, what's
in
smiling
my
ear to
email,
ear.
and we'll
That
connect.
was, I think that's the best way ever to, it's like, I can find you scaling brands, or leading a whitewater rafting trip somewhere in the world. I bet you do a great job with that, by the way. I bet that would be I bet that'd be a kick to go out there with you. So I appreciate you coming and spending time on the show today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a ton of fun, and yeah, appreciate everything you do. And I think you're at the core infrastructure layer of e-commerce. So
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Marketing People Love. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on another episode. Cannot wait to share these Sherpa-like stories with you time and time again. Till next time, Jacques Spitzer signing off.